You're listening to the Cryptic Crew podcast. I'm your host, Mark Childers. Before we get started, if you've had an encounter or an experience or just something unexplained, click on the link tree in the description and share your encounter. Thank you for listening to the Cryptic Crew podcast. On this episode of the Cryptic Crew podcast, I have the privilege of introducing Bigfoot researcher, founder of the American Primate Conservancy, and his work has been on multiple television documentaries, including the Travel Channel, History, and Discovery. My friend, Todd Neiss. Todd, welcome to the Cryptic Crew podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you, and I'm glad we were able to hook up finally and get an episode.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it has, yeah. Todd and I met at the Glide Sasquatch Festival in Glide.
That's right. That was back last spring, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a great show. Great. I love that venue. It was a wonderful, wonderful conference.
Yes, I like the way they have it set up. And the weather could have been a little better, but that is typical, I guess, Pacific Northwest weather.
That it is. I've spent over 60 years of my life over there. And like I say, you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes because it will change. But even so, I think we had a great turnout.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the crowd was really good. Actually, it was really good. I enjoyed it. It was our first time in the Pacific Northwest, and it was beautiful. You know, the scenery was, golly, I've never really seen anything like it. You know, redwoods, and we went over to the coast as well.
Oh, you did?
Yes, toward I guess it's Coos Bay.
Coos Bay, you betcha. Yeah, the Pacific Northwest is a world into itself. Very, very unique and beautiful.
Yes, nothing. Like I said, we've never seen anything like it. It was really nice. Good visit. Todd, let's tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself, and then what got you started in the world of Bigfoot.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, just by way of introduction, like I said earlier, I've spent my entire life, or at least 95% of it, in the Pacific Northwest, in and around the Portland area, mostly in some rural areas. You know, growing up there, you can't help but hear stories about Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but I had always wrote it off as, you know, an urban legend or a campfire tale to scare the kids or just Indian lore or what have you. But as far as believing it myself, being an avid hunter and hiker, fisherman, I've even scaled a few mountains, I had no reason to believe that legend was true. So I guess you'd call me a skeptic at that time. And then all that changed for me on April 3rd, 1993. And that's when I was a sergeant in the Oregon Army National Guard, or specifically a combat engineer. And as such, we utilize a lot of explosives in our training and in real-time combat situations to take out bridges, for instance, to take out minefields, different things that we can employ explosives to either get our troops through a certain area or prevent the enemy from coming in to where we don't want them to. So on that particular day, we were in the Oregon Coast Range between the seaside town, the town's called Seaside, between Seaside and Saddle Mountain State Park. We had special permission to use some private timberland to conduct our training. And that training consisted of using 3 different rock quarries, gravel quarries, that were in that private timberland. And at each quarry was a different combat scenario, if you will. And we were to go around to each of them and practice our trade. So these weren't small explosions by any means. These were very large explosions using upwards of 100+ pounds, sometimes 200 pounds of ammonium nitrate or plastic explosives, C4, just depending on the scenario. We had blasted at the first 2 out of 3 and had just set our charges, cratering charge, at the third site. And of course, standard protocols Once you light that fuse, you get the heck out of there, right? Then we'd go to a safe area, wait for the explosion, and then come back and check our work. Pretty standard stuff for combat engineers. And so we had lit the fuses on that cratering charge and boarded our vehicles and started heading to a safe area. As I said, I was a passenger in a Humvee, the second of 5 vehicles in this convoy, and I sat directly behind the driver. And it was an unusually nice day, unlike what we saw in Glide. It was untypically nice, so I had the window down. And having hunted that particular unit there, the Saddle Mountain unit, it was just natural for me to look about the countryside looking for wildlife, specifically deer or elk or whatever. And as we rounded this very slow, sweeping right turn, the second blast site came into sight. It came into my view. And as I looked down toward this rock quarry that we had detonated a large explosion maybe an hour earlier, I noticed 3 figures, very dark figures, standing right out in the rock quarry itself. And by figures, I mean they were standing on 2 legs and obviously observing us. But these 3 individuals, it only took me a couple of seconds to realize these weren't people. I mean, initially that was my concern, that some civilians had possibly gotten through our security cordon and gotten into the area, which would not have been good. So, but like I say, after about 2 seconds of really straining to see what I was looking at, I realized that these were not human at all. And by that, I mean, just the profile itself. These things were black from head to foot. There was no sign of any clothing whatsoever. And if you can imagine, behind them is the type of rock. There was basalt, which is kind of a light concrete gray colors. These black figures standing in front of that light gray backdrop made a very unique contrast. And what I observed, what really jumped out at me initially was these arms. These arms reached down to their knees, and they didn't appear to be bending forward, but just standing straight upright. But again, these arms were just unusually long. The legs also were disproportionately long compared to say, a human torso. They all were built like bodybuilders, to be honest with you, Mark. They were broad shoulders, very broad shoulders, a barrel chest which tapered down to their waist. Again, these long arms, just I can't get that out of my head. The other thing is, while the largest of the 3, and I would estimate somewhere between 8 and 9 feet in height, while that one stood there almost statue still, if you will, the 2 that flanked it on its left and right were swaying side to side, like shifting their weight from one foot to the other. And in the process, these long pendulous arms were swinging all the way down at their knees again. And they did that the entire time I was watching them. And this wasn't a 5-10 second view. I estimated I watched them for nearly 20 to 25 seconds. It's a pretty good long view. It doesn't sound like very much time, but look at your watch for 25 seconds and imagine seeing what I was looking at. I mean, it seemed like an eternity, but I was just in shock. I couldn't take my eyes off them. And I think subconsciously I thought, if I take my eyes off them and look back, they're going to be gone. So I was just focused on what I was looking at. And eventually we rounded that corner and I lost sight of them, and I just kind of fell back into my seat. And, my head was just reeling with a million questions, as you can imagine. And it wasn't long before we got to that safety staging area. And I just instinctively jumped out of my Humvee when we came to a stop. And since we had a few more vehicles still rolling in, I ran back in the direction we just came from. My hope was to be able to get another view of him. I mean, standing rule was, though, that because of the danger of what we're doing, that everybody had to be within eyesight of the group. And I went as far as I dared, 100 meters or more. And I knew if I went another 50 meters, I'd probably have seen them. But I was limited as far as I could go. But I stood there on my tiptoes with my hand up to my forehead, and I'm looking off in the distance, trying to see over this darn this berm that was blocking my view, just straining to get another view of them. And suddenly I heard somebody off to my right shout my name. And I looked over, and Sergeant Martin said, "What are you looking at?" And I dropped my hand to my side and I said, "Oh, nothing." And he continued to come my way. And I remember he was smoking on a cigarette at the time. And he gets right up to me and he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at the second blast site." And, you can imagine I'm like, "Oh, please say what I hope you're going to say." But I said, "I don't know, Jeff, what did you see?" And he took a slow drag off his cigarette and he looked left and he looked right, made sure nobody else was within earshot. And he leaned in and said, "I saw 3 large, dark haircut. I'm Bigfoot, I think." And at that, of course, I went, "Yeah, Jim, I saw him too." And so, I mean, it was amazing to know that somebody else had shared that experience with me, to be honest with you. Even without the corroboration, it wouldn't have changed what I'd seen, but I was just glad somebody else had witnessed that as well. And being in the National Guard, as a traditional guardsman, we train 1 weekend a month. We all have day jobs, And so it wouldn't be till the next drill, which would have been in early May, that we got back together. And lo and behold, we had 2 more soldiers come forward and admit to seeing what both Jeff and I had seen. It historically, and just from my own research over the years, it is a pretty unique sighting, not only with respect to the fact that we were blowing up their home, but multiple creature sightings are pretty rare. It's usually a single individual, and then to have multiple eyewitnesses on top of that, the combination of those 3 situations make it a pretty unique sighting in itself. And so I have been dedicated to learning as much as I can, researching, trying to understand what they are. Obviously, they're a very unique species, and trying to learn as much as I can about them, and sharing it with people like yourself and your audience.
Right. Yeah, that's an amazing story. And I know it made you feel better too when somebody else verified what you had seen.
Well, it wouldn't have changed anything in terms of I can't unsee what I saw in those 25 seconds. And it just astounds me to this day how those 25 seconds changed the entire course of my life. I will say having that corroboration gave me a little bit of encouragement, or courage, if you will, to go public about it. I get it, why 9 out of 10 people who have had a sighting tend to keep it to themselves. And you have to be concerned about the ridicule, people questioning your honesty, your sanity, and you put that on a scale and you just gotta go, is it really worth it, to come forward publicly about it? And in my case, I be honest with you, initially I wasn't going to say anything. I mean, my day job at that time, I was a vice president of a shipping company in Portland, Oregon. I'm a family man. I'm a non-commissioned officer. I work hard for my reputation. And so it was difficult for me to, putting it on that scale to decide whether or not I was, whether it was really worth it to come public about it. But no pun intended, but the more I thought about it, I realized that this was really bigger than me. And this was something historically, scientifically important. And I was extremely fortunate to have been able to see what I saw. So I've kind of looked for a purpose in that, Mark, in terms of, when I think about how many things had to have just aligned, come together to make that 0.5 second encounter happen, I just thought, I need to look for a purpose in that. And that's why I started the American Primate Conservancy. I had been researching for, ever since that had happened. But in 2015, I've just kind of had an epiphany that should these things exist, and they do, I know that, and I'm not questioning that, obviously, but the fact that they exist, maybe better put, this species has absolutely no protections because they're not accepted scientifically, and without validation scientifically, they're never going to get that. So my focus is to try to gain enough evidence to meet the criteria to get them officially recognized, and only then we can get some protections put in place. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, leave them alone. They're perfectly fine. They've been alive millions of years. They'll be around longer than we have." And that might be true, but I mean, without any true assessment of the health of the species, it's just a romantic notion. So I'd rather err on the side of caution and presume that they are threatened, if not endangered, because I couldn't live with myself if I found out that we've actually lost the species just due to ignorance, and God knows we've done that on many occasions in the past. There's many species we've known about, we've had photographs of, that are no longer with us, and it's just a scenario I don't want to have to live with regards to the species. I find them absolutely amazing as a species, and all the mystery that surrounds them just makes it that much more exciting to think of the prospects that we can learn from them. So yeah, it's a wonderful. Sometimes I say my claim to shame, my hobby gone bad. I wouldn't trade it for anything, Mark. It's been quite an adventure, and I'm looking forward to more in the future.
Right. Yeah. Let me ask you this, Todd. When you said Sergeant Martin, is that correct?
Correct.
Saw that. Did you guys report it to anybody, or was it kind of kept to yourselves? And then how did the other two gentlemen that came to y'all and reported their sighting, how did that come about?
Well, starting from your last question, these other two witnesses I never personally met. What I can tell you is my sources are solid. When we had this exercise and I had that sighting on a Saturday afternoon, we had what we call open post, which allowed us to stay off base as long as we were back in formation in the morning. And so I had stayed with my first sergeant, his wife, at their house, and I had told them about what had happened. And just ironically, one of the things that wives and girlfriends, significant others do for the National Guard is during some of these weekend drills, they set up a kind of a fundraising bake table, if you will. And now that night I had described what had happened to Dawn and Lena, Dawn being my first sergeant. And so what had happened was Lena was with some of the other wives and significant others of the Guard members in the foyer that leads to the drill floor from the front of the armor. And they were selling their baked goods and sandwiches and whatnot, usually to our own soldiers, but, or anybody that came by, but raising money for things like the Christmas party or summer picnic, that kind of thing. And Lena had been in the process, in the midst of telling these other ladies there at the table about my encounter. And can't help but think about the odds of this, but while she was describing what I had told her the month prior, she said two soldiers just came in the front door and they were passing their bake table there and heading to the drill floor for formation, and they overheard the word Bigfoot in the conversation. They both stopped, looked at each other, they looked at Lena and said, "What did you just say?" And then she repeated what I had told her that evening from the prior drill, and they looked at her and said, "We both saw it as well." And unfortunately, I was not able to identify them, but I can say I have absolute confidence that we wouldn't make that up. But I mean, the odds that they would just be coming in while she was in the midst of that. And it makes me wonder how many other soldiers actually had seen them, because like I said, when I saw them, I was convinced I was the only one that had seen them. And it wasn't until Jeff approached me that I realized, okay, at least there's one more. Considering we had 5 vehicles in the convoy, I would not be surprised at all whether as many as 5 or 10 people would have seen them. It's just that there were 4 that were willing to come forward about it. So that's how that happened. And I'm sorry, what was your first question?
Did you and I guess Sergeant Martin discuss it or report it to anybody else after the fact?
So to answer that, no, actually we didn't. Again, it was a personal decision on both our parts, whether we wanted to go public about it. And at that time, I did not. And so I didn't pressure him. He didn't pressure me. I didn't report it to my superiors. I will say this, and this is kind of funny. I did, between that April drill and the following drill in May, I had drawn up these signs, an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. I'd made this drawing of a Bigfoot and put Bigfoot research. I think I still have one around here somewhere. I don't throw anything away. I'm a hoarder, but Bigfoot research, and I had my phone number there. I made 2 copies, and there were 2 bulletin boards in the armory, on either end of the armory, and I pinned those up when I first came to drill in May. And they lasted about 30 minutes before they were taken down by who, I don't know, and I wasn't going to push my luck. But I tried. Since then, now, obviously, I stayed in the Guard over 20 years, 14 of which were active duty. And with all my television exposure and documentaries I've done, you can't keep that genie in the bottle. And so a lot of people, most people, I would imagine, knew of my interest, my hobby, air quotes, about Bigfoot. And it was never, most people probably pretty much just patronizing, nothing official. If that's where you're going, there was nothing official. I wasn't called in to discuss it. In fact, I will say that toward the end of my career, I had the public affairs officer discuss actually doing an article about my sighting, even though by that time it was over 20 years old. I thought that was interesting. Now, we never did get a chance to put it together, but just the fact that the PAO was willing to write something up about it, I thought, well, maybe they're getting used to the idea. I don't know. It never caused me any difficulties that I can speak of.
That episode or that encounter, changed your life's path. So tell the listeners now, when you go to these festivals or conferences and speak, and I know you speak all over, we've talked about that, Oregon, Washington, Tennessee, Scotland, I think you mentioned Ireland as well when we're talking earlier, but tell the listeners when you go to speak, what you discuss and what you're trying to get them to understand.
I'm glad you raised that, because I kind of approach the public speaking venue, I think, a little different than a lot of my contemporaries. And by that, I mean, my research is never ending. My research is ongoing almost daily. Unlike a lot of other speakers, I won't name anybody, but I'm just saying a lot of the speakers, most speakers end up repeating themselves from conference to conference. I made it a point to never have one presentation duplicated. So in other words, whatever I spoke about 2 weeks ago in Minnesota will not be what I'll be speaking about in Ocean Shores, Washington next month. I'm constantly updating things. I've probably got 30 different PowerPoint presentations I've put together over the years, and I never just, wash, rinse, repeat. I never repeat. There may be parts, but I kind of look at it like literally a lecture series, in so much as I've kind of put together, I don't know, I hate to say lesson plans, but I mean, there's so much that I have discovered over the years and continue to discover, because I tend to think outside the box, and a lot of it depends on the audience, I suppose. I try to cater to each audience based on certain things, but I talk about everything. For instance, I'll give you for instance, there tends to be 2 very distinct camps in this enigma. As you know, Mark, there's on one side you have the flesh and blood scientific, biological, by the book researchers. And then on the other extreme, you have what we kind of euphemistically call the woo. That's those that tend to dabble in the paranormal and supernatural. And there's a huge gap between these 2 camps. Lately, I've kind of stepped on that third rail, if you will, between these two different camps, which is kind of dangerous, I suppose, because I consider myself in that first group of, scientific, biological based. I tend to think everything is explainable, even the paranormal experiences people have. And so I knew I was kind of sticking my neck out there when I chose to stand on that third rail, if you will, because like I say, you're either group A or group B. And so I just kind of said, what if I could explain scientifically some of the experiences that these people have had. I mean, because some of these people are friends of mine, right? That are in that woo camp, if you will, that tend to want to, if they don't understand something, a certain attribute of the species or an experience they have, it's tempting to just apply paranormal or supernatural. So we don't have to really dig deep into really explaining how people have had these experiences. For instance, you'll get people saying, this is a good one. It was kind of where I got started down that rabbit hole, if you will. The eye shine thing. People talk about eye shine. And this is where allegedly this species is capable of allegedly generating light. Sometimes red is described quite often, but that in pitch black, I'm not talking about like in the beam of some headlights, like, because we know deer and dogs and cats and all kinds of different, including humans, do have that retinal reflection capability as long as there is a source for that light. But what had been described to me is an absolute pitch black with no source of any light, artificial light or otherwise, that these eyes can glow. I did my research, okay, let's talk about that. And I thought I had done my due diligence when I looked into, for me, my first go-to when somebody says, oh, Bigfoot they can fly and shoot flames out their butt. Well, okay. Show me one other animal, one other known species that can do that, and then we've got a starting point. And so the eye shine thing, I looked at what animals what species can generate light. And, you get into bioluminescence. Zooplankton, for instance. I scuba dive, and I've swam the night diving through a field of photoplankton, and it's amazing. You agitate them a little bit. They're almost like dust, but when you agitate them, they'll glow brighter. It's kind of cool. Certain deep sea aquatic animals, marine life can generate light. We do fireflies. Okay, now we've gone from water to land. Certain amphibians can generate some light, and that's electrochemical process. But then when I got up into the categories, no. There's nothing that can do that. So I kind of put it back in the paranormal file. And it was about 3 years ago, to be almost exactly 3 years ago, I was invited to the Omaha Indian Reservation in eastern Nebraska. And by eastern, I mean literally on the border of Nebraska and Iowa, which is separated by the Missouri River. I thought, if you'd asked me, name 3 states that Bigfoot couldn't exist in, I think Nebraska would be at number 1, because I had seen it as, I think most people, flat, tons of corn, rice, soybeans, but no mountains or forests. But actually, I was surprised to find that along the border of Iowa in that Missouri River Valley, there's a considerable amount of timber and some pretty rough terrain. And this is where I had been told by these tribal members, I had been talking with them for years. They had told me that they have had encounters with these things and they are generating light. And they sent me some videos, and it's very difficult to see it on video. But they said that they were having pretty regular experiences. And, there's a couple things right there that just are red flags for me. Multiple encounters, especially having formed some sort of a relationship with this species or being able to habituate them, just to me was incredibly long odds. And then, of course, the eye shine thing. So about 3 years ago, I was invited out there, and I went out there and basically had my butt handed to me. They took me into the field. This is during COVID, mind you, so there wasn't a lot of people roaming the woods. In fact, the main village there, called Neiss, was locked down at night. Nobody was allowed to come or go from that village. Well, COVID was going on. There was an exception made for my host because they were fairly high up in the council, and so they had, rank has its privileges, right? So, but we didn't go out until midnight, and we would drive to a very heavily wooded area, a lot of hardwoods, mainly oaks and some maple, I believe, and pretty thick undergrowth. So we would drive to the very remote 2-lane road that really no place to pull off the road, but there was a break in the guardrail on the left side, I remember, and they said, pull over here, turn off all the lights. Lights were not allowed by them, which is good, because then you don't have an alternate source that you can say, oh, that was, from the headlights or your camera or whatever. We walked across this road, and I'm telling you, it's so dark, Mark, that I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, and literally just kind of worked our way across this road, and we're staring out into blackness. I mean, absolutely. And my host, he's like, just, stay with me here. And it's like, and he cups his hands to his mouth, and he yells out in his Omaha language, he would say, "Oho, Kage," which means hello, friends. I would come to find out later. Nothing. I mean, not even crickets. It was just dead silent, pitch black. And then maybe 30 seconds later again, "Oho, Kage, gigaho." And I'll be damned, Mark, if I didn't see, like this, within a minute, what appeared to be a couple of, lights together, if you will, eyes. And, my fallback is assume you're being punked, right? He's probably got a phone in his pocket that he's remotely flipping on these LEDs out there. But the only problem was these LEDs blinked. They turned left and right. They moved left and right and forward and back. And by they, I mean, at times we had 2 and even 3 individuals at a time. And it wasn't just these glowing eyes, but there were some incredible vocalizations that went along with it, some that I've never heard. I've heard a lot of vocalizations. For instance, the first night we went out there, probably 5 minutes into our visit, one of these let off what I can only describe as a song, right? Not a concerto. I'm talking like a 5 to 6 second long tune. In say 6 seconds, it covered like 8 different notes. It changed in volume. It changed in notes, octave, whatever. And when I heard it, I was thought that sounded like almost like music. And another, 15 seconds later, I assumed it was female because of the high pitch and extremely loud volume too, by the way, because I could tell it was coming from quite a ways back, 200-300 yards at least. She does it again, note for note, perfectly duplicate of what done 15 seconds earlier, whatever. Did it a total of probably 4 times within about a minute, and each and every time was identical. Now, I don't know about you, Mark, but to me, when we're not talking about some arbitrary roar, or scream, or whoop, or whatever. We're talking song. When you have replication like that, that's not an accident, and more than likely, it's a message embedded in that, which means language. And for that tune, if you will, to be repeated like that perfectly was amazing. And I'll say this too, 3 days later in broad daylight, she did it again. Same, I'm certain it was the same individual, only once, but I'll never forget that tune from 3 days earlier. And it was exactly note for note the same damn song.
So what, Todd, was it like a language, or was it more like humming and the pitches changed or the tones changed?
It was musical. I mean, if you sang, I mean, would you call that language or chanting? It was, and don't ask me to replicate it because frankly, I couldn't, but it was singing. It was singing, and it was beautiful. It was not threatening at all. In fact, it sounded very welcoming each and every time I heard it. So, between the eye shine and the vocalizations, and this happened, by the way, in 2 different locations, and it happened, again, another red flag for me, repetitious sightings. Big red flag. No, multiple sightings, red flag, eye shine, red flag, heated encounters, pretty much on demand, red flag. Guess what? We did this 5 nights in a row, Monday through Friday, midnight till sometimes 2:30 in the morning. 2 different locations had activity every time, each and every time. And so it just blew my mind. And so Todd got on an airplane that Saturday heading back home and said, "All right, now you're going to have to explain that scientifically because it's not magic. It's happening. Call it what you want." I mean, I have difficulty with a lot of these paranormal names that people give things like zapped or orbs or, but be that as it may, I had to come home and figure it out. And I did. I was able, because I had to kind of pull it out of that file, open it up again, do a little more deep dive on it, and I was able to figure out how that was possible in pitch black with no apparent source of any other light. And what I came up with was it's a known phenomenon, and that is that animals with night vision have a couple of special things about their eyeballs. One is that they have more rods than cones. Rods collect light and darkness and provide depth perception, where cones will bring in color. But in animals with night vision, they have a lot more rods than our human eyes would have. And the second thing is the tapetum lucidum, which is the crystalline membrane that's situated between the retina and the optic nerve. And what it does is, as light enters the eyeball through the pupil, the iris, and hits that tapetum lucidum, because it's crystalline, not smooth like a mirror, but it's little crystals, it literally ricochets that little bit of light around inside the aqueous humor, the liquid part of the eye. It basically amplifies what little light's out there, that whole process, not unlike the night vision scopes we use today. It takes a little bit of light that we probably can't even detect and amplifies it to where we can see it at night like we do with the military. What civilians can use all day long anymore. It's pretty common, but if this is done naturally. I also had that confirmed when I got home and watched a show on, I think, the Discovery Channel that was called Earth at Night, and it was a 3-part series about, very interesting. If you can look it up, I highly suggest it, Earth at Night. But in the first of the 3-part series, they go around the whole world, really, and with extremely specialized, expensive, high-tech equipment. And we're filming animals, nocturnal animals, and everything from insects to full-size mammals at night in a night environment with equipment that the animals wouldn't be able to be aware that they were being filmed. So they get them in their natural environment at night. And it was amazing. But one that jumped out at me was a scene where they were filming a puma in Argentina. This mother puma, like a cougar, was taking some kittens out and teaching them how to hunt at night. And when they filmed this, what jumped out at me was the eyes especially on the larger cat. The mother shines so bright, it was ridiculous, especially considering some of the other footage they showed about other animals. And it was what the narrator said that really got my attention. He said, we've gone all over the world filming different animals, and he said, puma is one of a handful of animals that we have documented that we can literally see their eyes glowing at night with the naked human eye, without any equipment whatsoever. We can actually make out that glow. And I went, bingo. There it is. And it was always there. The answers, to be honest with you, Mark, they're out there. We just haven't either applied them, or discovered them, or applied them into this particular scenario. But I mean, if you extrapolate, it makes sense that if you take an eyeball, probably not much bigger than our own, in a 150-pound cat, and we extrapolate that to an eyeball, say about the size of a tangerine, you have a much larger aperture, which can take in a pupil that can take in much more light, and a much bigger retina that has a larger tapetum lucidum field, which you could only imagine would amplify light even more so than a smaller animal. So I think that explains what I saw. But this is what got me started on okay, I wonder what else I can grab out of the paranormal, supernatural file and apply science to, and explain some of these anomalies that people, some of them my friends, claim to have seen, and apply science to it. And so that's kind of been, for the last year and a half, has been primary focus, is to take things like, people say, I'll grab something out of the paranormal bucket. Okay, they can appear and disappear. They go through a portal or change dimensions. Okay, I'll take that one. Excuse me. And so I would say, okay, how can a full-grown animal, very large full-grown animal, seemingly fade out or come into focus? And I'm not going with the, different dimensions or a portal or UFOs or whatever. And I have done a lot of research in this, and I've come up with a number of different theories as to how that can happen. Everything from some of the hair samples that have been turned in under microscope appear to have, not all the hairs, but some of the hairs appear to have some like reflective crystalline structure to them. It's kind of like feldspar or mica, in rocks, and makes me wonder that, if you put light, especially white light, on a crystal, it tends to reflect in different hues and different spectrums. And I know it's a long shot, but I thought, that's one kind of thought I thought is they've got some sort of glitter, so to speak, very microscopic glitter infused in some of their shafts of their hair. Maybe they could literally act almost like a mirror. In other words, reflect the ambient light and surrounding colors. Then I went from that theory hypothesis into the whole polar bear theory. And because in my research, I discovered that polar bears' fur is not white. In fact, it appears white. And that is a very unique camouflage that nature has given to the bears. And how that goes is their actual fur itself is a very kind of a dirty beige color. But they have these shafts of hair, they're called guard hairs, that extend about a half inch beyond their base coat of fur. And these hairs are completely translucent, very much like fiber optics, if you will, fiber optic cable. In fact, I've got some around here. I've actually bought 1,000 feet of it to do an experiment, which I still plan to do. But a polar bear, what happens is when they're in a field of ice or snow, something very white, especially the brighter, the better. But these clear shafts of hair will literally pull in and absorb that ambient light and surrounding color. In the case of, up in the Arctic, white, it'll make that bear appear to be much whiter and blend in with the snow and ice than it really is. So you might notice I have on my chair here is a black bear, North American black bear pelt, which I love, but I'm going to have to sacrifice it to my experiment. But again, I've bought 1,000 feet of fiber optic. Let me grab it real quick if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So you see Exhibit A.
Right. The black bear
Our
pelt.
renowned bear pelt. Exhibit B. This
Almost
is
translucent.
fiber. Exactly. And if we put light on it, what happens is it will pick up the light and actually you can touch it to one end and it will literally travel through it to the other end of it. So this is 100 feet. I have 10 of these. And one of my experiments is going to be to cut these into, it'll take me forever, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to cut it in a lot of little hairs using fiber optics. And I'm going to take half of this pelt behind me and infuse it with fiber optic wire, if you will, and extend it just a little bit past the actual natural fur. And then I'm going to put it on like a stretch board or whatever, and take it out into the forest under different conditions, different lighting conditions, different backgrounds, different color settings. And if my theory is correct, like the polar bear, half of that hide will be very, very difficult to see. I think you'll be able to see the half that's very dark, like what you see over my shoulder, but I think the other half is going to pull in a lot of that surrounding light and color and make it extremely difficult to see. My third theory now, like I told you, I think outside the box. My third theory, and I kind of like it better than the other two, is that I have been delving pretty deep into infrasound. This is ultra low frequency sonic waves that are below human hearing. And infrasound is very interesting in that the lower the frequency, the more physical sound becomes. The higher frequencies, say above 20,000 hertz, 30,000 hertz, humans can hear between 20 hertz low to 20,000 hertz high. Dogs, for instance, can hear as far down as 15 hertz and up to 35,000 hertz. So they can hear both below and above human hearing. Different animals can, hear differently. And of course, as humans, we're limited. So anything that gets to below 20 hertz, we can't really hear it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's definitely there. And again, like I say, the lower the frequency, which means the waves, the pulses of the waves are getting longer and longer and longer. And as they do, they can literally create the lower the sound, the more of a shock wave sort of effect it can create. My latest theory has to do with, again, going back to show me another animal that can do this. I need to have that unknown species that can generate infrasound, and lo and behold, not only do whales do it and can communicate over hundreds and hundreds of miles, but elephants do it. Tigers do it. Alligators do it. Hippopotamus do it. And there's probably a lot of animals out there that do it that we just really haven't tested for. But we do know that whales can generate, and interestingly enough, it's always large mammals with usually fairly large lung capacities. But we're talking sound you cannot hear, but you can feel the effects, or that it has some form of physical effect on you, which you'll find that it will explain a lot of the paranormal anomaly that people are experiencing. So, but case in point, driving down the road in my big Dodge truck with a really killer stereo subwoofer and all this, and this song comes up. It's got a lot of bass, and since the wife wasn't in the car, I crank it up to 10 just for the hell of it. Go to change lanes, look in the rearview mirror, and I realize I can't see anybody in my side rearview mirror because, these bass pulse, this heavy bass notes are literally vibrating the glass and of my mirror. And so I had to literally turn down the volume in order for the cars in the next lane to slowly but surely come more and more into focus as I reduced that bass. And I thought, bingo, light bulb came off. If sound, especially bass sound, and again, we're talking sound we can hear, if bass sound can affect a solid piece of glass, imagine what it can do to a liquid-filled eyeball, right? You follow?
Yes.
So we've already determined that there are animals out there, generally large mammals, that have fairly large lung capacities that can use that. And they do use it for everything from communication to, in the case of the tiger, they use it for hunting. They can literally paralyze their prey, if you will, in so much as stun them with infrasound, giving them the advantage, obviously, to get up on them. And so if our subject, Bigfoot, can do this, and certainly they would have practiced it on every other wildlife out there, so they know what effect it has. Perhaps it helps them stun prey or helps them hide from them. And by that, I mean this. And this is where myself and Ron Moorhead we're good friends. I just talked to him last night. Ron has this quantum theory. He wrote a book called Quantum Bigfoot. He has this theory that the actual animal itself can vibrate into a frequency that literally takes them, I don't know if that's the right word, but puts them in a different dimension, that they can literally change their physical vibrational frequency, which will cause them to kind of go into a different dimension. My theory is that what's happening in the case, because this is Ron's argument as to how they seem to disappear. My theory is somewhat the same thing, but different in that what I'm saying is they're creating it, they're generating it, and the effect it has not literally happening on their end, it's happening on your end. They're causing you to have a loss of visual acuity because they're bombarding your eyeball, the membrane, your cornea, your retina, the aqueous humor. Liquid is the most perfect transmitter, if you will, for sonic waves. My theory is that they're literally bombarding your eyeballs with sonic waves to the point with the mirror on my truck, again, with bass that we can hear, which would be less powerful than even deeper bass. If it can vibrate my mirror and obscure my vision, then certainly a lower frequency with stronger sonic resonance could vibrate that liquid in your eye and cause you some visual acuity loss. And then, of course, I've taken it another step to okay, are there other examples of this sort of thing in history? And it turns out that astronauts, so we're talking where they were putting one or two guys in a capsule and strapping them to the top of an ICBM missile and shooting them up into space, that they were having issues reading the gauges. And these were analog dials, the needle type, not your digital stuff. And so as they're rocketing up away from the Earth, they had one job. You communicate with Houston and tell them what is the pressure inside, what's the pressure outside, what are the gauges reading, the oxygen levels, the temperature, and all that. And they reported back, we can't focus. We're not able to give you those readings because we can't, for whatever reason, we can't focus it. And applying the knowledge we have today with infrasound backwards in history, they realized that these rocket engines that they were taking them up into space were generating infrasound. And it was causing their eyes to blur, their vision to blur. And only once the capsule separated from the thrusters, the rocket, the booster, if you will, all of a sudden their vision came much more clear. So there you go. There's some history as to how sonic waves, infrasounds can affect your vision. Now, we know that. We know that there are examples in nature of animals that can generate infrasound. And so this is a theory that I kind of like because it'll go on to explain some other phenomena I'm sure we don't have time to get into. Anyway, these are some of the ways I try to think outside the box and go down these rabbit holes. And so I have basically, as of late, I've been able to scientifically explain at least 3, possibly 4 paranormal phenomena, anomalies that people have experienced who have just thrown it into the paranormal supernatural basket. I've been able to actually find scientific answers to explain that. And so my point is this. I want to build this bridge between these two camps that are so far apart. And I think it helps both of us because on one side, we've got science, mainstream science, institutional science that refuses to risk their precious credentials to get involved in this study. And a lot of it is probably due to this paranormal phenomena stuff that's being thrown out there that nobody's bothered to look into. And so, oh my God, look, there they go again. They're seeing orbs and they're getting zapped and they're disappearing. We're not going to get involved. If I can do this for them, then maybe they'll take another look at it, like I had to with the eyeshine thing. And then on the other camp, I can give them a little bit of credential relief, if you will, by saying, you weren't so crazy after all, right? Here, I'm not doubting that you had this experience. My only concern is how you interpreted it. And it's too easy to just say it's paranormal. And that's supposed to, explain everything away. But just as long as you attach that name to it. Now, let's find out the truth. Let's do a little deep dive and find out, is there a scientific answer for what you experienced? And then maybe we can bring these two camps a little bit closer together. Anyway, that's just one of the things I've been working on.
Yeah, there's no doubt various camps, when it comes to that subject. And if you'd asked me, and still ask me, I've said it before, I don't know if the word cloaking would be correct, but camouflage, I think they can camouflage. And I don't know, I know there's amphibians that do that. Are there any other mammals that do that? I don't know, not that I'm aware of, but you mentioned about the hair, but.
Well, nature offers, we can look back through all sorts of different species and find that nature provides amazing types of camouflage, whether it be, look at butterflies and certain insects that can just literally look like a leaf or a stick. We get a lot of these walking stick bugs here where I live, and you have to look at them real close to realize it's not a twig. It's actually alive. It's made, butterflies are made to look like something entirely different. Frogs, and of course we can talk about chameleons and different lizards that have the ability. Octopus, can literally change their colors to match the background. So, nature's got a lot of that stuff. Even when you look at, oh my gosh, leopards or cheetahs and the way they're spot zebras. I mean, all these animals have different unique ways of hiding, whether it be used for defensive purposes to literally hide or offensive purposes to allow them to get up on other animals without being seen. Nature is amazing, and we got a whole lot to learn yet about all the secrets that it holds. But that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, there's a lot. Again, that's what keeps us going, or keeps me going with the subject is mystery. The mystery of it, and it's fun to.
I love it.
Yes, no doubt about that. But Todd, thank you. I've really enjoyed this. I'm glad we got to get together and talk about.
It's great to see you again.
Things. Yeah, you too. We'll have to try to do this another time down the road.
I'd like that. I'd appreciate that very much.
Yes, and. Typically, at the end of each episode, we do like a rapid-fire Q&A. I'll ask you 3 questions. It's just casual, and it's the first thing that comes to mind. Or it's supposed to be fun. But I'm going to give you 3 questions. Are you ready? Favorite place to do a Bigfoot investigation or research? If you had to pick one.
Right now, Ozarks in northern or central Arkansas.
Okay, that's a hot spot of activity, from what I understand.
Yeah, I was amazed and delighted actually to find, especially coming from the Pacific Northwest here, there is an amazing amount of activity well, I found 19 established sightings from one database, 19 within 40 miles of my ranch. And I went, thank you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's quite a bit. Yeah, large.
I get people stop me all the time. I had people stop me yesterday and because of some signage I have on my truck, and they're like, "Can I take a picture of your truck?" Yeah, fine. And then somebody else comes up and wants that. They see that and they're, "Oh, yeah, so you're looking for Bigfoot around here?" I go, "Well, yes, matter of fact, I am." And they're like, "Well, they're here, trust me." And then I get the stories. I've done a couple of town halls around here, and I've had tremendous results. I did one about a year ago at a JJ's Buffalo Bar and Grill, where the karaoke night they'd have a dozen people show up. We had 75 people show up without any real advertising at all. So it's a big thing here. And again, it was probably one of those states that if you asked me to pick one where they don't exist, again, not knowing, Arkansas might have been in there, but not anymore.
Extremely, a lot of habitat for something like that to hide and flourish in.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Question 2.
Number 2, favorite hobby outside of Bigfoot research?
Traveling, writing. I'm taking that back. I want writing, but ask me if I've written a book. Probably about 20 of them in my head. I'm telling you, this computer right here, if it could talk, what's funny is for me, writing is really somewhat cathartic. It's personal. It gets it out of here and it puts it, on paper, so to speak, in my computer. Yeah, I do intend to get some books out. It's way overdue, but I just enjoy writing.
Yeah, I enjoy it as well. I started the book about 20 years ago, have not finished it, just stopped, laid it down, and have done some short writing, but I'm so ADD, I jump from one thing to another, so that's one of my problems.
Thank you. I think we're separated birds.
All right. Number 3, last one.
Right. Okay.
One food you had to take with you, camping or hiking.
Ooh, can I just say meat? Turkey. Beef jerky.
Jerky. Oh, beef jerky. Okay, gotcha. That's a good.
Any jerky.
Good.
I don't care.
Yeah.
It could be
elk jerky.
Absolutely, I've made it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've shot elk and deer. I plan to have some here shortly. I've got about 10 deer that here on my ranch that show up on my game cams almost every night. So, yeah, I love wild game jerky. Bear isn't bad. Even goose. Have you ever had goose jerky?
No, never had goose.
I had a brother-in-law that used to goose hunt quite a bit, and he had a recipe that he would take the meat from the breast of the goose and cut it up into slices, marinate it, and smoke it. And in fact, he sent some to me when I was in Iraq, and I knew what it was. And it's incredibly delicious. But I had fun taking it around to different people, different soldiers, and go, "I'll give you $5 if you can guess what this is." And none of them got goose. None of them. Oh, it's buffalo. Oh, it's this, that, or the other thing. No, a goose jerky is really good.
Never had it. Had bison or buffalo, I guess. Yeah, bison, but love it. It's good. And deer. I love deer jerky. So good stuff.
Yes, sir. I got my smoker ready to go.
Gotcha. Well, Todd, thank you again for taking your time to come on the show. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's been fun, Morgan. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, absolutely. And for the listeners, if you've had an encounter, something strange or unexplained, click on our link tree in the description and share your encounter. Thank you for listening to the Cryptic Crew podcast, and God bless.